In today's cognitive training, we talk about negotiation. Negotiation is not about position. In general, everything in life has to be negotiated. It happens between friends, enemies, and friends and FOs. You have a position. I have a position. From a standpoint, negotiations are hard and soft. The so-called soft means that I treat you as a friend, so I don't want to target people or things. The purpose is harmony, and I don't hesitate to sign an unequal treaty. The so-called hard means that I treat you as an opponent, and the purpose is to win. Only you give in without me giving in, both against people and against things. And exert all the pressure that can be exerted, and you must win in the contest of wills. Both hard and soft strategies are common and tend to lead to easy outcomes. When soft meets hard, it is an unprincipled concession. And unprincipled concession is a slippery slope. It will not stop in the middle, but will continue to slide to the end. If you give in without principles, you will not let the other party think you are a good person. And you will only send a signal to the other party that this guy is easy to bully, so you have to eat you up and wipe you clean. Hard meets hard is the sky thunder hook fire. The best result is deadlock. Often things are bad, people also offended, each other only a strong will. If you only understand the negotiation as a dispute between the positions of the two sides, what do you want? What do I want? You want more. And I want less. In the end, there are only two choices, hard or soft. To put pressure on each other, and whoever can afford the pressure will suffer. If they are evenly matched, they will bear it together. If the negotiation is done, it will hurt feelings, and if it is not done, it will hurt feelings even more. So Harvard negotiator Roger Fisher said that position-focused negotiation is a dead end. And there is another way to negotiate, which is more decent, more principled, and more effective. His book, Getting to Yes, Negotiating an Agreement Without Giving In, the first product of his Harvard negotiation project, activates a completely different operating system based on a completely different perception of negotiation. Negotiation does not need to be stress testing and a battle of wills. It can become a journey for both parties to find a reasonable agreement that is mutually beneficial. However, face-to-face becomes side-by-side, which does not happen naturally. It comes from a systematic restructuring of negotiations. The 4 Harvard negotiations. First, negotiations are not a battle of positions, but a battle of interests. Interests are the real drivers, and specific positions are just specific expressions of interests. The same interest can be expressed in multiple ways. Inconsistent positions are not necessarily incompatible interests. It may just be that both parties have insufficient imagination in expressing their interests, or insufficient expression. After fully understanding their respective interests and demands, both parties do not have to be trapped in a particular option. For example, Israel's key interest is security, not a piece of occupied land. Insisting on occupation is just a position. Negotiations around this position are prone to a dead end, and the negotiation space around security interests is much wider. What's more, there are multiple interests. There are core interests, important interests, and general interests. Like a game of chess, the core interest is the general, the important interest is the chariots and horses, and the general interest is the soldiers. Abandoning the soldiers to protect the car, abandoning the car to protect the commander. And being trapped in a single dimension will eliminate these wonderful trade-offs. It's like turning a war into a trench battle on the front line, with every inch of advance and retreat causing heavy casualties. Therefore, it is necessary to fully communicate with the other party, understand the interests of the other party, inform your own interests, and gain insight into the reasons, mechanisms, and sequences behind these interests, so as to open up the choice space for reaching an agreement. Fisher said that you need to brainstorm, everything can be imagined, and even invite opponents to participate in brainstorming and imagine together. Second, focus on the issue rather than the person. Usually, if you encounter someone who says to you, "I am focusing on the issue rather than the person," you have to be careful. He will definitely focus on the issue rather than the person. Usually, the so-called focus on the issue rather than the person means that I have responsibilities. And all the things I'm going to do to you next are forced by my responsibilities. Don't blame me. It's business, nothing personal. It is conceivable that what he did to you next was definitely not a good thing. What Fisher said about focus on the issue rather than the person is really focus on the issue rather than the person. Instead of face-to-face tug-of-war, the two sides are side by side, searching for a mutually acceptable combination of options in a three-dimensional maze of multiple interests on both sides. You do genuinely appreciate each other's various efforts in the search, and you can sincerely help. Third, look for differences. Negotiation is a trade-off, and the trade-off must first have a difference. Whenever you look for differences with the other party, there are differences to reach an agreement, which is a beautiful paradox. The difference can be different interests. You pay more attention to economic interests. He pays more attention to political interests. You pay more attention to Lizzie. He pays more attention to face. You pay more attention to material gains. He pays more attention to ideology. All of these are the basis of transactions. Differences can also be differences of opinion. If the same thing is completely convinced that both parties are right and the other party is wrong, it seems to be a dead knot, but in fact it is not. Because both parties are so confident, they will agree to submit the matter to an independent and impartial third party for arbitration, and the deadlock is broken. The difference can also be a different view of time. You value the future, he values the present, and your discount rates are different, so exchange his future for your present. Differences can also be different risk attitudes. The same thing is the same risk, but you and the other party have different risk tolerance, and the quotation is different. The difference in quotation is a trading opportunity. In short, look for differences, take things that you don't value but the other party values, and exchange things that you value, but the other party doesn't value, the other party is. The same logic. Both sides value everything equally, then there's really no talk. It must be my honey and your arsenic. That's the best. Fourth, don't compete with will, but look for objective standards. Well, the interests of both sides are completely clear to each other, and mutually beneficial exchanges have been found and completed, but there will always be some places where the interests of both sides are competing. As mentioned earlier, negotiations are not all zero-sum games, so position-based negotiations are wrong. After all, the space in the positive-sum game is used up, you still have to face the remaining zero-sum game. But negotiations are not all positive-sum games, it is always a complex of positive-sum games and zero-sum games. It's just dividing the cake. The more you get, the less I get. How Toto? First of all, even at this point, don't compete with will. Fighting will is both inefficient and will not end in peace, it's just a dead end. Second, never give in to pressure, only to reason. Pressure is hard and soft, in many forms: coercion, inducement, appeal to feelings and friendship, or just die and not give in. No matter what pressure you face, your response should be the same: refuse to give in to the pressure. Explain the rationality of your side's demands, invite the other side to explain the rationality of their demands. Propose objective criteria for a reasonable division of interests, and emphasize that you only give in to reason, never give in to pressure. How to divide? You have to tell a truth that I can agree with, talk about feelings, talk about strength I don't recognize. Fisher said that this truth must be based on objective standards. The so-called objectivity means that it is not subjectively determined by you and the other party. It comes from social norms, morals, laws, consensus, no matter where it comes from. The key is that it is external, existing, and commonly accepted principles. Although it is called objective, it can be more than one, and there are also many possibilities. It can be precedent. Precedent is so persuasive that it can be said that the entire common law system is built on the power of precedent. It can be the criterion of distribution, with the equal distribution of those who see as one criterion. The distribution according to contribution is another, and the distribution according to need is another. It can also be a distribution program, such as a cake. He divides you to choose first. The trick to negotiation is to find the one that works for you among a variety of objective criteria. Of course, you also have to be prepared for the other party to find the one that works for him. In principled negotiation, both parties cooperate to find the objective criterion that best fits the situation. In short, we cannot give in to pressure, but we must be firm in adhering to objective standards. And we can be relatively flexible in reaching agreement on which objective standard. This is a negotiation technique that has both principles and reality. Of course, in negotiations, you will always encounter unreasonable negotiators. They attack your plan, and they attack you personally, and they have to make you do what they say. Even so, don't fight back. You're not here to be angry, you're here to negotiate. Attack, counterattack is an endless loop. You have to diffuse his attack on you into an attack on the problem, and in turn ask them how they will respond. Ask more questions and say less, and even take the initiative to invite the other party to criticize your plan. Anyway, they will always criticize, and criticism will bring useful information. In the end, even if there is nothing to say, in the face of the other party's extremely unreasonable demands, silence is also a weapon. You don't have to defend yourself. You explain the reasons for your plan and what your interests correspond to. Ask the other party what the reasons are, and whether there is a more reasonable compatibility plan. If the conflict of interest is for tat, ask the other party. If a party, the interests of the other party must be above the other party, and there are no objective standards to support this. Unless the other party's answer is strong and reasonable, you stick to your opinion. Conversely, if you accept the other party's reasoning and decide to compromise and make adjustments, make it clear that this is because the other party's claim makes sense, based on objective criteria, not because of pressure from the other party. If you can't reach an agreement all the time, then in the end, you can always settle for the next best thing, agree to disagree. Admit the differences, keep the differences for the future. You have done all of the above. Who will win the negotiation in the end? In general, the side that advocates reason and is committed to working with the other side to find objective standards will have the advantage. You are a firm advocate of reason, and you are willing to listen to the other side's reason, and these legalities give you strength. It's easier for you to reject the other party's arbitrary and unreasonable demands than for the other party to reject your reasonable demands. Not every negotiation can reach an agreement. This is the reality. But you can always insist on your own interests and principle in every negotiation, and this is the right choice. Summary of this lecture. To sum up, today we talked about Harvard's negotiating wisdom. I have told you for principles so that you can understand that your goal is interests, not positions. To find differences, to win more space, and not to let yourself be limited by positions, to focus on the issue rather than the person. At the same time, in the face of pressure, don't compete with your will, really be reasonable, and win the rationality in the negotiation. The source of inspiration for today's thinking training is Roger Fisher's The Power of Negotiation. Thinking today. I'll leave you an interaction. Please share a negotiation experience that you are impressed with. And then compare what you did not do with the negotiation principles we talked about today, and what you can do better next time. You are also welcome to share today's content with your friends. There are negotiations everywhere in life, and you may also need it.